My name is Hazel. I'm a therapist and Pilates instructor at Mountain Massage Company in Bowness in the Lake District in England, and I'm an APPI Pilates instructor. I'm just going to talk you through some of the really basic principles of Pilates this morning. So, what we call our 5 key elements. So it's principles that we keep coming back to in our Pilates. So, we're going to think about our pelvis first of all today. So we're going to think about where our pelvis is in time and space. We're going to think about being in our kind of neutral pelvis. So this is going to be individual to everybody. All right. So in standing, it's kind of nice to think of that pelvis as like this. If you imagine like a bowl of water. Okay. And what we're going to do, we're going to start to rock that bowl of water forwards and backwards. So as we gently tip forward, you can imagine that water sort of trickling down the fronts of your legs there. And as we tip backwards, that feeling of just gently tightening around the buttocks and just gently sort of as if we had a tail, tucking that tail between our legs, we can imagine that water trickling down the back of the legs. So just feel for that movement for me. If we're not used to this movement, it can feel a bit strange and stiff at first. And we're just rocking backwards and forwards. Some people will have lots and lots of movement here. I don't have loads, so you might get a little bit further than me. Now, centering, finding our sort of neutral pelvis is going to be very individual, but it's kind of halfway between those two end points. So I just want you to feel for that halfway house between that sort of tipping the pelvis forward and tipping the pelvis back. Okay, and then we're going to pull in and use our pelvic floor and our lower tummy muscle. It was so super important in Pilates. So, bring your hands, your fingertips, to the pointy, sticky, outy bits of your pelvis. Okay, sometimes we call those our hip bones at the front here. I want you to bring them in an inch and bring them down an inch. So we're sitting sort of just a bit above the pubic bone, where we might think our bladder might be. Okay, or where if we had a pair of skimpy bikini bottoms or Speedos on, about where they would be. Okay. So, how do we switch this little muscle on here? So it's a little muscle called transverse abdominis. And some people like to imagine sort of a pelvic girdle or a belt sitting around their hips. And imagine that belt being tightened up. Like imagine what that would feel like if we had that bracing around the pelvis. So that switches that muscle on quite well for a lot of people. Some people like to think of those hip bones, okay, ball and socket joints, kind of being like magnets and then sort of drawing together, stiffening together a little bit. So that works quite well for some people. Well, you might want to imagine a little zipper on a tight pair of jeans. We just need to get that pair of jeans done up. We're just zipping up from pubic bone to belly button. Okay, so it's a little firmness here, not a huge, huge bracing movement, tiny little movement there. Let's have a practice with some of those. Then we think about our pelvic floor muscles, so the muscles that are underneath. So if we think about tightening around back passage, as if we need to stop ourselves from passing gas, that works quite well for a lot of people. Or if you think about pulling up, as if we need to stop ourselves from going to the toilet, pulling up from underneath. Or if you think, for guys, if you think about retracting up, that works quite well as well. Okay, so that's something we're going to keep coming back to. Then we're going to think about our rib cage and our breathing. So bring your hands to your lower ribs. And let's just take some breaths in and out here. So I want you to try to breathe into your hands. So as you breathe in, the hands hopefully are going to start to move out to the sides of the rooms. And as you breathe out, the hands will kind of sink in towards each other. So try to breathe into the way you think the low part of your ribs are, the low part of your lungs are, and breathing out, hands should sink in. Good, nice. We're going to keep coming back to that kind of style of breathing as we work. Then we're going to think about where our rib cage is in time and space. So, with our rib cage, what we want to think about is just gently connecting it down slightly. So what I mean by that is, so when we move our arms, we kind of, we want to control that movement of the rib cage. So if you think about little braces, maybe, if you ever worn some braces, and those braces just tightening down and just sort of connecting that rib cage down to that pelvis. Or we could think about little springs attaching from the lower ribs to the pelvis again, and we're just sort of wanting to just get that gentle connection. So we want to be just sort of gently connecting down from our ribs to our pelvis, so we've got that little bit of control in our midline. Let's think about our shoulders next. So with our shoulders, not going to be too stiff and too formal through the shoulders, but we just want a little bit of connection at the back. So I like to think about being nice and wide and open through the collarbone. So that's gently going to make us kind of just connect some little muscles at the back of the body. Some people like to imagine those little shoulder blades sliding just gently back and down towards their back pocket. So we've got just a little bit of muscle engagement there. And then lastly, let's think about our head and neck. So it's quite easy these days to be a little bit forward in the head position. I want you to think about just gently tucking the chin. Imagine we've got like a little peach or a little apple or a ball or something just tucked under the chin, and we don't want to drop that ball by allowing the head to come forward, but we also don't want to squash that little ball either. So it's just a small kind of little muscle contraction here where we just bring our head up, and that should really lift us upright. So last little bit, I want you to think about the spine being nice and tall and long. Imagine a little zipper zipping up your spine, and it's just making you grow just that last couple of millimetres. Or a little helium balloon coming out the top of your head and just pulling you gently up towards the sky. These are our basic elements with Pilates, and we will keep coming back to them. So do have a little practice, and don't worry if you don't get them at first.